Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into my official college football conference championship best bets. There's only going to be 5 here, but I'm also going to go through the final bowl predictions going into the conference championship weekend. A lot of these predictions should come to fruition based on the fact that a lot of the teams have already finished playing. So let's get into it. At number 5, it is the MAC Championship. Miami of Ohio taking on Toledo. Toledo, the better record, the big favorites in this one. I do like Miami, though, to cover the 8-point spread. Toledo, they've been good. They were really good last year, but they laid an egg towards the end of the season and in their conference championship. I look for a repeat of that to happen. Miami of Ohio, they've had a solid season. They've got a decent defense. I'm expecting a close game. 8 points is too much. And even the Toledo, look at that. 60% chance to win. That's less than being an 8-point favorite. That's like a 3-point favorite. So there's good value on Miami of Ohio analytically and also just in my opinion. Moving on to number 4, it's Georgia, Alabama. Georgia, I believe they're actually 6.5-point favorites now, maybe 6-point favorites. It doesn't really surprise me. A lot of people betting on Georgia, and I will take Georgia to cover in this game. Alabama, they've been I wouldn't say a streaky team because they were really good going up until that Auburn game. And a lot of people are trying to cope. They're trying to say, well, it's a rivalry game. I mean, come on. Auburn is not that good. They should have lost to Auburn. It was 4th and goal from the 30-yard line. It was a terrible defensive alignment. Auburn the week before loses to New Mexico State. That's going to raise some red flags for me when it comes to Alabama. Jalen Milroe, certainly a solid quarterback, but I just think Georgia... I mean, you could say at some point Georgia's got to lose. Like, there's no way they're going to be able to have like a 60-game win streak. So maybe this is the game they lose. I don't see it. I think Georgia wins this game, ends up covering. It's very interesting. If Georgia loses this game, they're pretty much out of it unless other stuff happens, because I just don't see, based on the alignment, if Texas wins, they're going to have to be in front of Georgia because Alabama's going to have to be behind Texas because they lost the head-to-head, but then Alabama's going to have to be in front of Georgia because they beat Georgia head-to-head in their conference championship game, which would be this game here. It is very confusing. We will see. Moving on to number 3. It is Boise State minus the 3 taking on UNLV. UNLV, a very surprising team this year. I think it comes to an end. Boise State, they're way better than their record. They've been blowing teams out in the second half of the year, and they've got an interim head coach. There's a storyline there. Could he get the head coaching job if they win the Mountain West Championship? We will see. I do like them, kind of an underrated team. You look at their record, especially within the Mountain West, people are going to think they're not very good, but they actually are a very solid team. They also had that non-conference game against Washington, very hard one there. Moving on to number 2, it is Washington taking on Oregon. And so everybody in this game is saying, this is crazy. This is a neutral site game. Washington already beat Oregon. How is Oregon 9.5-point favorites? Well, guys, when this happens and you get all the public, you get all the NPCs going in on Washington because they've got, quote, value, you've got to go the other way. And we're going in on Oregon in an absolute trouncing. We've seen the story from Washington throughout the past 5 or 6 weeks. They've really struggled against bad opponents. They don't have a great running game. Michael Penix Jr. has been a lot worse the last few weeks. It has not been nearly as potent of a passing attack. And then Washington also doesn't have a great defense. You're looking at Bo Nix gunning for the Heisman right now, really looking to run up his stats. Oregon playing for a playoff spot. If they win, I do believe they will be the 3 seed. Depends on some other stuff, but I do believe that, and I do think they cover the 9.5-point spread. It's just, we see this a lot. Well, I wouldn't say it a lot, but this does happen a few times a year where everyone's like, this is so disrespectful. When you think the line's disrespectful, that tells you that there's a reason that Oregon is 9.5-point favorites. It does seem a little bit crazy, but the way Oregon's been playing recently, I do understand it. And then moving on to number 1, it is the ACC Conference Championship. Louisville taking on FSU. I am going in on Louisville to win this game outright based on how FSU played last week against Florida. That's not a good Florida team. They're very undisciplined. They probably should have won that game outright if they don't make mental errors. And FSU, I mean, even their backup quarterback gets almost concussed there towards the end of the game. They've just got no juice without Jordan Travis. And even when FSU had Jordan Travis, they were playing close games against bad teams. So I think Louisville, it's not that I'm overly confident on Louisville. This is a very bad league, the ACC. The fact that this is the conference championship game. But I do think Louisville, coming off that loss last week, by the way, I predicted that against Kentucky. I think they get a surprising win here, and that knocks FSU out of the playoff. Otherwise, it will be very interesting to see FSU possibly in the playoff and big-time underdogs. That leads us into the potential predictions here. You can see the Rose Bowl game. I think this is pretty clear right now. It does look like it's going to be Michigan and Oregon, basically a pick'em game. You can see the spread, Michigan +1. Oregon, very slight favorites. It's like we've come full circle when it comes to the 14 playoff. Oregon, they played in the Rose Bowl back in 2014 in the first college football playoff with Mariota against Jameis Winston, and they won that game easily. Now they're facing Michigan, and then you would have the Sugar Bowl. This was remember back in 2014, Ohio State-Alabama game. Now it looks like it could be Georgia-Florida State. I'm surprised that would only be an 11.5-point spread. I think it'd be a lot higher than that if it is Georgia-Florida State. Or it could be Georgia-Texas if Florida State loses and Texas wins. We will see. It also depends on Georgia beating Alabama. Then you can see the next set of New Year's Six games, the Fiesta Bowl, Washington taking on Alabama. Kind of a zesty matchup as long as everyone plays. Michael Penix Jr. might sit out that game, based on his draft stock, whatever. Although I do think he'll play in it. If it comes to it, Bama would be sitting -4. They would have people opt out, obviously, but I do think, Milroe would play because I believe he's only a sophomore. The Peach Bowl. Remember how good the Peach Bowl was last year, Ohio State, Georgia. Now it's possibly Penn State versus Tulane. Yeah, Tulane getting very lucky with SMU starting quarterback being out, but Penn State, big favorites, -13.5. That reminds me of the, Penn State versus Memphis when they had to face another Group of 5 team back in 2019. And then the final set of the New Year's Six Bowl, the Orange Bowl in Miami, Ohio State and Louisville. Yeah, so if Louisville gets blown out by FSU, they might actually drop below NC State, which would mean Ohio State would face NC State in this game because it has to be an ACC team if FSU goes to the playoff. If FSU loses, they're probably going to be facing Ohio State in a meaningless, bowl game like this. But Ohio State, big favorites. We'll have to see. Ohio State, obviously, very disappointed after their loss to Michigan. And then Texas and Missouri. How many times is Texas going to play? Oh, never mind. That's the Sugar Bowl they normally always play in, I think. Yeah, Texas versus Missouri here in the Cotton Bowl. Not really. I wouldn't say it's an irrelevant matchup. Certainly there'd be a lot of Texas fans that go to that game, but kind of a letdown with Texas trying to make the playoff. And then Missouri, it's good for their program, but they just don't have a lot of national shine. And then some of the other games, you can see the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. Ole Miss taking on Iowa, so Iowa hogging up that 4th spot for the Big Ten because, the Big Ten's just not deep at all this year. Ole Miss, massive favorites. Iowa, they're going to struggle to score, but they should do well on defense. Notre Dame, LSU, I feel like this game has happened already twice or 3 times before. I wonder if Jaden Daniels would play. Pick'em, that's a very nice game there. The Arizona Bowl, Fresno State, Miami of Ohio. I like Fresno State in that game. And then the Music City Bowl, Auburn, Wisconsin. Kind of a crappy matchup there with Auburn sitting -3. 2 teams that really weren't that good. Outside of Auburn's final game against Alabama, the Gator Bowl, Tennessee versus North Carolina. I would heavily go in on Tennessee -6.5 because I would expect Drake May to sit out of that game. And then you can see the Alamo Bowl. This is a nice matchup. Oklahoma taking on Arizona. Oklahoma, 2.5-point favorites. Arizona, the up-and-coming team. Very motivating matchup there. Dylan Gabriel probably playing in that one. The Holiday Bowl, Clemson versus USC. The Holiday Bowl is the one that's always on at 10:30 at night. Yeah, in San Diego. Clemson sitting -4. Strange matchup. Does Caleb Williams play? Probably not. And then the Duke's Mayo Bowl, Virginia Tech, having a very under-the-radar finish to their year. That's a solid team, Virginia Tech. Good offense with a really nice dual-threat quarterback. Taking on Kentucky. Kentucky coming off that nice upset win against Louisville at the end of the season. Very evenly matched game with Kentucky -3. And then I do have one more parlay to round it out. So you can see Boise State sitting -135 on the money line against UNLV. How about the over on the Iowa game? Only a fool would bet the over on the Iowa game. They've gone under in 13 straight games. 34.5 is a crazy low number, though, for a game involving Michigan. You would think Quite honestly, that game's probably going to go under. I hate to say it. It's just the way Iowa is. But normally these Big Ten championship games, Michigan ends up blowing out the opponent. So we'll see. You do have Oregon on the money line. That's kind of an easier pick, minus 360. Louisville, almost in a pick 'em at this point against FSU. Wow, there's a lot of money that's coming in on Louisville. And then Georgia on the money line, minus the 230, with Liberty trying to finish off their undefeated season, 13-0, taking on New Mexico State, who's playing like a full NFL season schedule. They played an extra game. They're on to their like 14th game right now, and then they play another game when they, in the bowl. So what a lot of football for New Mexico State. They played in week 0, and they didn't have a double bye, so that's why. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.